Everyone. If you need to get up and do jumping jacks at any point to, get the blood flowing, we'll all turn a blind eye. Okay, we are in 2 Samuel 13. Second Samuel 13, I feel like saying what I said with Judges 19. It's just, not any fun. It's not a great chapter to have to study and not a very enjoyable one for us. It's unsavory, but that is kind of the point. And the Bible does contain unsavory stories of sin run amok. And that's there to give some kind of lesson for us and to show what's happening when people get away from God. This account has a lot of information for us that's going to push some of the events forward with Absalom, with David, and give an explanation for how Amnon ends up not being the next king of Israel, as you might expect, because Amnon is the firstborn son. He is the one with probably the strongest claim to get there, though David was not a firstborn son, so maybe he's not too attached to that idea. In any case, this section, starting with this chapter and going on for several more, is really the beginning of the Absalom narrative. And to start the Absalom narrative, not really talking about Absalom, that might be a little bit confusing to you, but look at the way that this chapter starts. There's an emphasis already put that we are talking about Absalom, even though we've got to talk about Amnon and Tamar first. Because verse 1 says, "Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar." Absalom is not initially part of this story, but the reason why it's here is to explain some things about Absalom, to show how he's going to end up kind of estranged from the rest of his family, and that will set the stage for him to be trying to usurp power from his father. Okay, so keep that in mind, that this is part of the Absalom narrative. So, what did Amnon feel for Tamar? We know Tamar is Absalom's sister, and Amnon is David's eldest son. He is Tamar's half-brother. And what does he feel for her here? Gary? Yeah. He describes it as love, and, even the narrator does, but it's pretty clear that this is not the self-sacrificial kind of love of, I would do anything for you. This is, lust and desire run amok. He's going to indulge his desires, and he's not at all looking out for what is the right thing to do or what is good for Tamar. This is just going to be a mess all the way. We are told that Tamar was very beautiful. Amnon has noticed that, and it says in verse 2, in my translation, that Amnon was so tormented because that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar. And your version might have something like obsessed in there. Again, we see an obsession, we see a torment that he is overflowing with desire here. He's making himself ill over his desire for her. And this is all, of course, very improper. Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
It's absolutely lust.
Yeah.
You know what I wanted to point out with that? You can work yourself up into infatuation.
Yeah.
And I know it was lust, because later he kicked the curb.
Yeah.
Treated terribly.
Yeah.
And so it's just we get like that. And
Yeah.
you think, imagine this, imagine that.
Yeah.
But definitely, totally, there's no love there.
Yeah.
If he did love her, he wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, none of his actions show any love, that's for sure. And he's really not treating her well in any of this, at any step of the way. His desire for her is very evil. So who is Jonadab, and why is he trying to help Amnon? And I gotta put scare quotes on help. That's the only right thing to do. But who is this guy? It's his cousin. Okay. So Amnon's cousin and his friend. So verse 3 tells us he's the son of David's brother, so that makes him Amnon's cousin. And why is he trying to help Amnon? There's not like an exact answer necessarily on, I mean, you know, friends, cousins might have a reason to try to help each other, but also you might be able to extrapolate that he sees some opportunity for gain here. That Amnon is likely regarded as the next king of Israel. That's what a lot of people are going to expect. It's not a bad idea to set yourself up as the person who makes the future king's problems go away. That's Jonadab's, I think, his purpose here. Mark?
That's a good point. I did have a question on what you thought of Amnon's mom. A lot of speculation is that she was actually one of Saul's wives. However, the scriptures have nothing to say about that, so I don't know that I think that at all. I think this is just another name.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that idea there. I'm not sure about whether that would have been one of Saul's wives or not either. It's, of course, something that is speculated about, but it's hard to know with names, right? It's easy to connect these similar names and assume it's the same person, but you know, we know there's different people with the same name, even in our society and culture. They have the same thing as well. So it can be hard to know that for certain. Yeah, sorry, I wish I had something more definitive for that. So, yeah. Okay, so Jonadab, I think, you know, it doesn't come right out and say it, but like we don't need to be naive, right? Be the problem solver for the future king. Where does that set you up in the future? When Amnon, you know, takes the throne and he's looking for advisors and looking for people to put in power around him, he turns to his fixer, his guy, his friend who's always been there to help him. Jonadab doesn't even know what the problem is here, or maybe he does suspect, but he's going to make an attempt here to try to fix the problem. And if you think that all of that's a little too pessimistic, the narrator does go out of the way to say Jonadab was a very crafty man at the end of verse 3. So he has a scheme, and that to me seems the most likely scheme. Otherwise, why does he care? So Amnon tells him, you know, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. And Jonadab comes up with this scheme to try to create some opportunity for the two of them to be alone. I will point out here that this is a terrible friend, and we ought not have friends who help us indulge our temptations and sinful desires. You cannot get away from every form of sin and sinner in the world, and we are exposed to things. But it is true what the Bible says, that evil companions corrupt good habits, corrupt good morals, and we need to be very cautious about the company we keep when there are people who would like to see us indulge our temptations and sinful desires. That's not the kind of friend that you want to have. So what pretense does Amnon create to get alone with Tamar, according to the scheme? Dave, for you?
Well, I just wanted to comment on
Yeah, please.
Jonadab, if I say that.
Yeah, please do. I think so, yeah, because Amnon is not ashamed to say this to his cousin. You think he'd be a little ashamed. You think that he wouldn't want to say what was going on, but he really is not ashamed of his desire. Excuse me. He openly talks about it with him, and then, sometimes we need to do that. Like, we are supposed to confess our faults to one another. We are supposed to be able to go to each other for help. But what Dave is saying here is a good point. When you need help, when you need counsel and advice and help with what you're struggling with, think very carefully who you go to. Not the kind of person who's going to downplay sin, who's going to tell you, but it's not a big deal, who might even encourage you to do it. There are lots of people who will do that, either because they just don't care, or because they would like to justify their own sin. And if you join them in it, well then, hey, we feel very good about ourselves. We're just two peas in a pod. Instead, hey, you might not be able to change what you feel or what temptation you are dealing with, but go to someone who is spiritually mature and say, I'm struggling, I don't want to sin, but this is what I feel, and seek their help and their counsel. Lisa?
Well, Amnon might be king, and no one knows the implication here that they understand Solomon's placement
Right.
under the kingship. So as far as Jonathan is concerned, he's only facilitating what the future king wants.
Right.
They don't hold Tamar in very high regard. She's not considered under Jewish law to be an actual sister. So, he was free to marry her if that's what he wanted, but he had no inclination for that. He never said, I want to have her in my life.
Right. Yeah. So, two things you've noted there. Yeah, she's not considered to be his sister under Jewish law, and so there is some more, open opportunity there for him to marry her if he would like to. But that's not anything that he's talking about. He doesn't bring up marriage. He doesn't bring up wanting to be with her or share his life with her or anything like that. He just wants to fulfill his lust and his desire. And we'll see that play out, that he's not thinking about what Tamar wants or what's good for her at any step of the way. In fact, Tamar is really more of an object in this story, as horrible as that is. She's not treated as a person with agency, as a person with the ability to make her own decisions. She is taken advantage of and abused throughout this story, just kind of used and discarded, and it's really an awful thing. I have heard people point to stories like this in the Bible and say, look, this is proof that the Bible is evil, which is insane. It's talking about an evil thing, but if you read this and think that this is being promoted, you've missed the Bible message big time. This is not being promoted. This is not being celebrated. This is in no way said to be a good thing. This is against God's plan, very displeasing to God. Lisa?
Not according to Jewish law, what happens to him. And what he does is worthy of death. And even though his father doesn't take any steps in that direction, the consequences do come back upon him.
Yeah. Right, absolutely. We'll have a lot more to say about both of those things going forward. Okay, so, all right, so then the pretense that Amnon creates, what's the pretense that's going to get them alone together?
Sick.
Okay, yeah, I'm sick, I'm feeling ill, send Tamar to come and to make food for me and to nurse me back to health, and that's at least a plausible idea, and so that scheme works in that Tamar, David sends Tamar to Amnon, and we have no reason to believe that David suspects anything that's going to happen here. He's not a part of this and has no idea what Amnon is scheming. But still, there are other people around. There are servants. It is not just Amnon and Tamar. And so he needs a little bit more pretense. Verse 9, it says, verse 8, she went to her brother Amnon's house where he was lying down. She took dough and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, "Send out everyone from me." Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the chamber, that I may eat from your hand." And Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon, her brother. So there's kind of incremental steps here, getting closer and closer to this pretense of having them be alone together. So verse 11, he takes hold of her, and note that now she does not have the option to just run away or get away because he has taken hold of her. So again, this is, in no part of this can we put any blame on Tamar. She is not in control of this situation, has had no part in it up to this point. And will have no part in it going forward either. And in fact, she will work to convince Amnon not to do this. But he's grabbed onto her, and she's not able to get away. And so how does she try to convince him not to do this? What are the reasons that she gives? Mark.
Quite a few reasons, actually.
Yeah, she does give quite a few reasons. Yeah. Mark?
She goes as far as to say, and this puts a different light on it for me, she's not actually refusing him. She's saying, "This isn't right, what you're trying to do. My dad, go talk to your dad.
Yeah.
He won't refuse me from you." So this to me just brings the whole, she is totally righteous and so strong in this. Far more brave than what we see Bathsheba.
Yeah.
And she is so brave to do this.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, she's just a pawn.
Yeah.
And she does not want to be defiled. And I don't know if it's because of her relationship with God or what. She
Yeah.
does not want this to happen.
No, she doesn't. And while there are a lot of details about the affair with David and Bathsheba that we are not told, it's just sort of summarized as, and he took her and lay with her. Here, we are given, unfortunately, just a lot more detail. Okay?
Yeah, she says, "Don't force me.
Okay.
No such thing should be done in Israel."
Mhm.
So this is just completely against everything that we stand for.
Mhm.
She calls it folly.
Mhm.
She says that this is going to bring shame to me.
Mhm.
So kind of like, if you do care for me,
No.
like this is going to be shameful for me. She says you'll be a fool.
Yeah.
Considered a fool in Israel. And then she says, like, if this is what you want, go to King David.
Yeah. So there are multiple reasons given here. And I do like that the first one is, "Don't force me," or don't violate me here. Showing her express refusal of this, that she wants no part of it. That she is not a willing partner in this at all. This is not a case of him having seduced her at all. That she says, if this happens, it will be because you have forced me, and do not do that. This is not done in Israel. That's a dig, right? That we've got, all these unrighteous people around us, and that might be what they do, but we don't do this kind of thing in Israel. That's not right. That's not proper to happen here, and you should know better. So this will shame her. This will bring shame upon her. Unfortunately, the way that this was often looked at, and this is not a part of God's covenant at all. This is more just the way that they looked at it. That it was a shameful thing for the woman who was victimized here. That she had been dishonored, and maybe not that she bore guilt exactly, but that she had been defiled and that now she was not fit for anyone else. which really is just a horrible way to look at the whole thing and not a part of God's covenant at all, not the way that we should look at it today, but she knows the way, but it's going to be perceived. Lisa?
She tried. It wasn't her just simply trying to reason with him. She was trying.
Yeah.
And that's how the whole Amnon is that even in her distress, thinks none of it is consideration.
Yeah, it's just awful all the way around. That this is no great, loving moment here. This is not the pattern of what this is supposed to be at all. This is purely taking advantage of someone, and the fact that she is crying and resisting and clearly, sorrowful and angry and everything about this, and that does not stop him, really just says terrible things about Amnon. Yeah.
We don't see her giving in at all.
No.
Even verse 14 there says that him being stronger, so, it sounds like he was fighting back.
Yeah.
That she was so proud.
And that is the reality sometimes, that it comes down to physical strength there. You would be one of the outrageous fools in Israel, is the way that mine translates that part of verse 13. But this is, this would be a great shame on you, too. And while it shouldn't be a shameful thing for Tamar, because she hasn't done anything wrong, when she says it's going to be shame for her, she's, reflecting the reality of how people will perceive it. But she's absolutely right about what it is for Amnon and the way that it should be perceived, for them back then, for us today. That is the action of an outrageous fool. That's not, there's nothing that ever justifies it. No matter how strongly he feels, no matter how strong the desire is, I don't have words strong enough for this. And sometimes, people do want to downplay and say, well, the desire is just so strong, there's just nothing that a man can do, or boys will be boys, or no. Just no. That's not how that works. And he has made himself out to be an outrageous fool here, and so does anyone else who follows in his footsteps. Then probably one of the hardest things for us to see is that she says, well, don't do it this way. Maybe we could get married. Go talk to the king, and we could just get married. And that's a really hard thing for us to even fathom, about why she would want that, why that would be perceived as a good thing. But again, their cultural context was really different there. And she's looking for the best end for her, and to retain some level of honor.
It does speak well about how long we've known God's intent about two people in marriage, things that happen outside the marriage and all those kind of things. Really just, it's been knowledge for thousands of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So she, in desperation, has tried all these things, and none of them make any kind of headway with Amnon. He is not going to listen to reason. He is not going to listen to her distress. He is not, seemingly he's not bothered by this at all, that she is resisting and this upset. And so he is able to just overpower her. So what does Amnon do afterwards? Aaron.
He adds insult to injury. Tells her to leave. Says that his hatred was greater than his lust for her.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the love that we typically think about. So bolts kicks her out, bolts the door after her. Again, he pleads with her. Says that this is worse than what you've already done.
Yeah.
Because of the consequences of her living a desolate life.
Yeah. It's just a mess. The whole thing's just awful. Because yeah, once he's satisfied himself, he just throws her out. He has stronger hate for her than whatever love or really lust, that he felt. And we saw how powerful the lust was. His hatred now is even more powerful than that. Lisa?
Well, it's probably based in shame for his son. And probably, again, in that towards the victim. And he says, he doesn't say kick him or out, or it's this woman. It's like no honor to her at all.
Yeah. No, he does. Even here, he is still treating her more like an object than a person. Get up, go, and telling the servant, put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her. Just being kicked out as something unwanted and whose feelings don't matter. It is awful. And she does plead with him and say here, what you're doing now is even worse than the other thing you did to me. And again, that's a hard one for us to wrap our minds around. We live in a very different cultural context than they did. And so we would never say such a thing today. But again, she knows the reality that she faces, that because of this, she is going to be perceived as unclean, defiled, dishonorable, not fit to be married to anyone else. And I'll say again, that's not part of God's covenant. That's not part of anything that God says is supposed to happen, but she knows that that's what is going to happen. And so at this point, the best kind of life that she can see going forward is for Amnon to take her and marry her. And surely that's not going to be a very enjoyable life there with the way that this has begun, but that's still the best option for her at this point that she can see, but he doesn't want that. Dave, and then Gary?
Yeah, just not really a question, but a thought. It strikes me that, is it possible, I guess it is a question, is David partly responsible for this? Because he had issues with this stuff, right? Did he not teach his son, against it, or did he teach him about it? I mean, why would his son act like that? David, being a man of God, had that issue. I know that for me, if I did, I would have to teach my son that's wrong, God hates that, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. But it strikes me odd that he had the same issue as he did. Not, David didn't break it, but you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. That's, what you're identifying here is important, because that we have some unanswered questions about like how Amnon was taught by David, but regardless, David has lost some moral authority here. And we'll talk about that more with his reaction afterwards, or lack thereof. But he's lost some moral authority to be able to speak about the sexual purity and about doing things the right way and being faithful to your wife. What he did with Bathsheba is known, and his sons know it. And so that's the example that they have. Now, it is true that sometimes we can use our failures as a way to teach and to show, I did this and I shouldn't have, and maybe David did try to do that. But that's harder than just showing the good example from the beginning. Okay?
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do is a much harder lesson to instill in
Yeah.
your children. The lead by example is much more powerful.
Yeah.
David is compromised in this area by his actions, unfortunately. And I think there's still the appeal to God, right? Is that this is God's will. This is what God expects, and it's God's standard that we really should be holding ourselves to, and our children, and those around us.
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is the complication that comes when sin enters the picture. It does damage our ability to influence others, and especially the people close to us. Sin is more complicated than just, well, I sinned, so I ask for forgiveness and truly repent, and then it all goes away, and there are no more consequences anymore. No, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Yes, you really can be forgiven. Yes, God is not going to hold that against you, and you really can still be rewarded and be right with Him, but there are consequences to choosing to sin, and that affects the people around us. Ida?
These are all maybe towards the same. And one thing I'd like to do is kind of take it out of the sexual realm and just bring it into people's daily lives. Obviously, to me, it seems like there was something about the optimization of not just women being sexually right. And so that was something that came down into the consideration. The other thing is that we need to be very careful, and I think Aaron's point that we need to look to Jesus in this story and to God and not ourselves and our families and people. But we have to be very careful in the things that we do, especially in the church, so that the next generation doesn't go a step further. David took Bathsheba and was a king who had royal court authority to do this and everything, but then his son just seems to throw everything, all decency right out the window.
Yeah.
And so we need to be careful. Is there something that we're doing today, our practice as worship or as a organization, that the next generation will say, well, they did that, so we can go ahead and do this.
Yeah. Because there is a natural desire to want to push the envelope, to want to try to break those boundaries. And, we do see things kind of go step by step, with each generation that might have been unthinkable to the previous generations, but you laid the groundwork for it. Like Ida's saying, that, what you were too blind to see is you're setting the stage for your children and grandchildren to take what you did just a little bit farther. That's why we are so dedicated to keeping God's standard for everything that we do, and it's strict. It's a strong standard that we have to follow, and many times we think, why does it matter if we loosen it just a little bit? Because there really is no just a little bit. It does tend to spiral. Jeff?
You know, in Tamar's and David's defense, whatever I'm gonna say, Abner had thought in his mind. Jonadab, knew about it. But, if David had known, hey, he's got this infatuation over his half-sister, now let's keep them apart and let's talk to him about, some more stuff. But yet, we don't see David's reaction like that, it's like, hey, you're sick, okay, well, hey, you want your sister to come and fix you something? Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. When Tamar, when she comes in, she's making the food for her brother, she's not feeling any, sense of danger or anything like that, even when he sends the people out, she's not saying,
Yeah.
sensing, it's like, hey, they're leaving, I think I better go too,
Yeah.
We don't see anything like that. So it's innocent, I think, on them too. But like I said, if they had suspected or known that this was going to happen or something like this would happen, even in the inclination that it was happening, and they would probably, I think he, being a man after God's own heart, would have tried to stop it before that.
Yeah, we have no indication that David or Tamar had any inkling what was going to happen. That they knew of Amnon's lust or suspected that there could be a problem here. The fault is put on Amnon exclusively in this. But David's lack of moral authority in here because of his past failures is going to influence the way that he then reacts to it, and may have influenced Amnon's boldness here. Aaron?
I don't think Tamar expected this to happen.
No.
I do think there was some knowledge, I feel like, that Amnon liked her. In verse 20, we haven't gotten there yet, but Absalom sees her, and his first question is, has your brother been with you? And like that, to me, is, you know, like Absalom, like, why would he say that? Why would he jump straight to, has your brother Amnon been with you? So it's very possible that there was something.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, David may have had no idea
Yeah.
what's going on. He's running the kingdom. You know, there's a lot of things going on, but Absalom knew something.
Yeah, and still, even then, it's hard to imagine that somebody really is going to go that far. That someone really is going to take it to a violent level like that. We just do like to think better of people than that. Jeff?
Well, the answer to that, right above there, it talks about her rending her clothes and putting on ash and stuff, in mourning. Well, people know that, hey, you went to your brother cooking a meal, and now you're mourning and put on ashes. What happened?
Yeah, something. And maybe Absalom just got word or just, figured it out here one way or another. There's lots of things we don't know about this, but the fault is put on Amnon here entirely. This is, nowhere in here is Tamar condemned for anything that she did. She took very reasonable actions throughout this whole account. This is Amnon's sin overflowing. Mark and then Lisa.
Yeah, I thought very much the same thing, with Absalom going directly after Amnon. And maybe you heard about it or whatever, but like what Jeff said, she tore the sleeves off her shirt, which indicated that she had been taken by somebody.
Yeah.
And there was issues with that. And just a quick note for me, when I read through this, in the beginning, Amnon is saying that he loves her. He's not indicating that he's coveting her, just that he loves her. The word is love, or love.
Yeah.
He's obviously fooling himself, or he's just trying to fool other people.
Yeah.
Obviously, this guy is just a bad person.
Yeah.
Through and through, he reveals himself. He can't even stand himself. He wants her out because, like what Lisa said, the guilt is standing right there in front of him.
Yeah.
And he just can't stand himself now.
Yeah, it's just a mess here entirely. Lisa, go ahead.
There's an argument, whether that was a good guy or a bad guy. But the fact that he has a lot of information, maybe sharing information with anybody or the silence, so he has to go to David. So it's his position on this, which is the villain or the innocent not guilty.
Yeah, I don't see him very innocent here. For Jonadab, he's crafty throughout it all, working to kind of help Amnon's desire, and then he tries to smooth things over later, but it's hard to defend his actions.
I wonder what his expectation was of the steps what he did.
Yeah.
And then later on, he does seem to be a person of entry on kind of position.
Yeah. I think simply a lot of times they just don't care about the consequences that come after. Just not really considering how it's going to affect her, how it's going to affect others, how it's going to create this turmoil in the family. No, that's not really considered here, is my take on it.
Or free will.
Yeah, right. So what's the effect on Tamar's life? Dave? Yeah, devastation. Yeah, Dave?
Well, many things. The incredible shame she had to endure. do nothing.
Right.
I think that's what prompted us and what we went through here is to get him.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. So yeah, so let's think about this effect for Tamar first here. So she lives, it says, as a desolate woman. It's devastation on her life, and part of that is because of the way that this was perceived by the community around them. And like I already said, it's not necessarily the way that it should be perceived, that she should be considered this way, but that's the reality of the situation. But also, even when we say, okay, that's not what it should be, that's not how a woman should be perceived after something like this has happened to her, we also don't want to downplay the fact that these have very real long-term consequences on people. Like there's trauma involved with this. This really affects people to an extreme degree. And Amnon was not considering any of that. He was considering his own gratification there just for a moment, but he has ruined her life, and he's responsible for that. Lisa? Yeah. 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 It's very sad.
An act such as this is worthy of death, according to Jewish law, raping somebody.
Yeah.
Punishable by death. So, it says that David was angry, but here's getting David's defense. I committed adultery, so, I should have been put to death too.
Yeah.
I don't want to put my son to death because of what he did. I'm angry about it. I'm not happy about it, stuff, but, I can't, put him to death when I should have been put to death too.
Yeah, this whole thing gets complicated there because it does show that he's angry, but he doesn't do anything. And yeah, you can argue that about, he's worthy of death, but David was and he didn't die, and maybe he wants to try to show some mercy, but he literally does nothing. Nothing is not the right response here. And this is such an evil thing that has happened. Of course, the Septuagint adds in here more than just that he was very angry. At the end of verse 21, the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, adds, "But he would not punish his son Amnon because he loved him, since he was his firstborn." I don't know whether that is, an addition put in there trying to explain it, or whether that is a satisfactory explanation. One way or another, I think he's lost his moral authority to be able to talk to his sons about this, and here he just does nothing, and it becomes just a terrible thing. Because we have like 60 seconds left, the way that this chapter ends is with Absalom biding his time, waiting 2 full years, but not doing nothing. It said that he hated Amnon in verse 22, and he was waiting for an opportunity. And this hatred grows in a similar way to how Amnon's lust grew as he nurtured that. The hatred is growing here, and he comes up with a scheme to get all the king's sons together and to go to the sheep shearers. And he murders Amnon in cold blood. Steve?
I was looking last week after the last interview. There are some books, there's all these issues that have come up with this and other events that can be kind of in the same room. There's books like Solomon, Book of Prophecy, what's the word? Anyway, there's a book I overheard rarely hears say, Song of
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And Solomon does do a little bit of a better job talking about that with his son than David does with his, it seems. Yeah, so Amnon gets murdered by Absalom, and again, David doesn't really do anything about this. Jonadab tries to smooth things over. Amnon's the only one who's dead. Don't worry about it too much. But then Absalom really has to flee. That he just goes and lives out away. He's estranged from his family. And that's going to set the stage for him building up his courage to try to usurp the throne of David. So this has been important for that reason, to see how Absalom is progressing in his character. All right. Thank you, everyone. Next week, let's go on to chapter 14, because I'm tired of 13, and we'll do that.